What is going on, Miami Dolphins fans? Ben Morgan, Fins Up Network. First and foremost, I need to apologize. I didn't get to do my first preview video of this week. Hotel internet sucks. I probably don't have to tell a lot of you that. But yes, that hindered me from doing my first preview video of the week. So all that means is we have a ton to get to today. We're going to be talking the top matchups, keys to the game, keys to the victory over the New York Giants. We're talking injury updates. I've got some viewer questions we're going to squeeze in. We got thoughts on the Chase Claypool trade. And then finally, we'll get to that New York Giants, Miami Dolphins final score prediction. Before I jump into everything, want to hear from you. Final score predictions, go ahead, drop them in the comments. Let's get some Dolphins wins. Let's see who gets closest to predicting that final score right. As always, we've got injury updates. We've got everything you need on the scroll, but we are going to talk some of the key injuries as well, because what we learned was Terron Armstead, as we sort of expected, indeed falls on the injured reserve, meaning he's out at least 4 weeks. And then Connor Williams, Jalen Phillips, the names that we're always worried about the last couple of weeks, are indeed questionable. Let's talk with Terron Armstead right away. Like I said, out at least 4 weeks, which puts you back in time for the Chiefs game in Germany. Miami Dolphins bye week is right after that. So do you want to plug him in and then have a bye week, or do you want to hold him out of that game as well and then hold him out the bye week as well and then have him ready to go week 11 for the Raiders? That's what we'll have to see. That's what we'll keep an eye on. Terron Armstead mentioned he wants to be back. He wants to beat that timeline. He didn't necessarily want to be out those 4 weeks, but the team has shown time and time again so far this season the long game is in mind. So they're shelving him for the time being, putting him on IR. We'll see how that all plays out. Connor Williams, Jalen Phillips, like I said, they've been limited all week in practice. However, the team is hopeful, and they are very hopeful. Mike McDaniel was joking about how he's going to need a bodyguard if he doesn't let these guys play on Sunday. But they're hopeful that they play, and I think more than anything, us fans, we are hopeful they play because, yeah, Kendall Lamb has stepped in fine. Not Kendall Lamb, I'm sorry. Andrew Van Ginkel has stepped in fine and actually thrived while he stepped in for Jalen Phillips. But the Liam Eichenberg experiment at center, it killed us against the Bills, and we don't want to have that happen again today. And we'll talk about that here in a second. Wrapping up some injury stuff from the Dolphins side of things, Nick Needham, Robert Jones both had their 21-day windows essentially open. When you come to practice, you've got 21 days from that point in time for the team to put you on the active roster. If you don't get put on that active roster, you go back onto IR for the rest of the year. They will not be in for this game. They have not been put back on the 53 roster yet, but we'll look to see how that goes. But what that means as well is look for potentially an interior lineman or two potentially being elevated later today, Saturday, for that Dolphins game. Maybe even the Dolphins get one of those true centers that people have been kind of saying, you know what, why don't we give this guy a shot rather than going with Liam Eichenberg all the time. And that's Alama Uluave, who ended up kind of making the practice squad after being an undrafted free agent this year. Touching on the Giants real quick, because this is important. They've got 3 offensive linemen that have been officially ruled out for this game, with Andrew Thomas and then rookie John Michael Schmitz being the main, probably the biggest ones here. And then Saquon Barkley is listed as questionable. However, there are some people in the New York media that are saying, probably keep it safe here. More likely than not that he'll probably be held out of this one as well. Let's talk a little bit more about those New York Giants offensive line issues, because, man, if you paid attention to last Monday night's game, Seahawks-Giants, did you notice all of the sacks that happened? Daniel Jones and the New York Giants took 11 sacks against the Seahawks. It was quite literally a sack fest. We need to do that. Daniel Jones didn't take all of them. Paris Campbell had one of those sacks on a trick play. But regardless, 11 sacks that the New York Giants gave up. The thing is, it's not just an issue for this team last week. Look at what they've done earlier in the year. They gave up 7 sacks to the Cowboys, 3 to the Cardinals, 2 to the 49ers, and then obviously 11 last week to the Seattle Seahawks. So being down 3 offensive linemen, 2 very main ones, big ones, will not help this issue, especially Andrew Thomas. He's kind of come on as one of the better young emerging left tackles in the game. That's going to be an issue, but an issue on our side is really, if you look about it from like a pass rushing standpoint, it's been Andrew Van Ginkel. He's the only Miami Dolphins player with more than 1 sack so far this season. He's got 3. Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, and yeah, I know Phillips has been fairly limited this year. They've combined for 1.5. That's not enough. We hope Jalen Phillips is back. We hope he's healthy. We hope that it's our time to break out, because I actually watched a video that Dan Orlovsky put out following that Seahawks-Giants game, and he kind of broke down every sack and really said, you know what, the offensive line didn't play well, but they were really only responsible for 4 of 11. 4 is a lot of sacks to be responsible, but a lot of them, basically the rest, were on Daniel Jones and his decision-making and holding on to the ball and going the wrong spot with that. So that's going to be interesting to see. That's one of my key matchups of the game. The other one that I have got is handling Dexter Lawrence, New York Giants interior defensive lineman. He's not out to the statistical monster season that kind of like we're used to. He's got 18 tackles, 1 for a loss, but no sacks. But make no mistake about it, I think we all know he's one of those top upcoming interior defensive linemen in the game. He needs to be accounted for. You need to know where he is on every single snap. The sacks started coming in last year. He had 7.5 last year to go along with 7 tackles for a loss, 3 pass defense. So even when he's not getting in there, he's getting the hands up, and 2 forced fumbles from the interior as well. And guess what? He got what Christian Wilkins wants. He got paid. He's one of those young guys that is getting 22+ million per season now. And guess what? Being in the interior, guess what that means? He's matched up against our center, who's, if Connor Williams plays, has an injury issue. And our guards, who have been good, and Robert Hunt has been really good as well. And Isaiah Wynn has held up as well. But, man, I tell you what, if it's Liam Eichenberg or if it's Connor Williams, that's not 100%. We need to account for where Dexter Lawrence is, potentially provide extra help. That's 100% one of the top matchups that I'm going to be watching. Because if you look at that defensive line as well, it's been kind of interesting. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more too, because the Giants defense has given up the 8th most rushing yards allowed through the first 4 weeks of the season. And what have the Dolphins done? Well, kind of unexpectedly, especially after how week 1 went, we've got the most rushing yards per game. De'Von Achane, 3rd in rushing yards. Raheem Mostert tied for the most rushing touchdowns in the league. So what does that tell me? You got to stay committed. Get it established early. Stay committed. Handle Dexter Lawrence. But, man, if you can get that run game going, that would be so clutch. But it's going to come down to how that offensive line is performing, because the Dolphins wanted to run the ball against the Bills, but getting into a track meet with them, not being able to slow them down, Liam Eichenberg having the issues up the middle, up front that he was, it sort of took Mike McDaniel out of his game plan. He didn't want to abandon the run, but he admitted it. He did it. So we cannot have that happen again this week. Let's get into some questions. Like I said, I tried to squeeze as much into this video as possible, so I just picked out a couple that we'll get to. So thanks to everyone that did. I will try to get to more and more, especially next week when I have the ability to do both of my preview videos. The first one is, though, will we see a bigger game on the ground or through the air? Chris with the question. And it's kind of what I just talked about. I think we'll see a mix. I think with the Dolphins, we're always going to try to see a mix. Mike McDaniel wants to be balanced, but he knows what he has offensively with Tua, with Tyreek, with Waddle. That's always going to be there. The pass game is always going to be relied upon. But in a game like this, if Connor Williams plays and he plays effectively, I truly think that this could be one of those games where the ground game just gets going and you can always rely on that. So, well, I think the passing game is always going to be there. It'll always be consistent. I could see a big game coming on the ground this week. Like I said, I'm going to try to run through these as quick as possible. We got a lot to get to still. JT Sam with, what is Jeff Wilson's role once he's healthy? His practice window did not get opened yet, so let's keep that in mind. And then could him and Cedric Wilson potentially be trade bait? Well, I'd say if Jeff Wilson comes back and when he is healthy, yeah, I still have him 3rd in the pecking order, and I think a lot of that is because of Achane's emergence. I think we all thought he was going to be okay, but I didn't think we thought he was going to be this. So I think Achane is going to be, and then maybe even though Jeff Wilson's 3rd in that pecking order, maybe you get more of a healthy balance between Wilson and Mostert, sort of like what we saw last year. But the advantage that Wilson has going for him, if he's healthy, when he's healthy, is the short yardage situations. We haven't had a clear-cut guy for that role yet. We've struggled in some of the 3rd and 4th and 1 situations. Jeff Wilson could be very helpful for that. And then in regards to the trade, honestly, you can never rule out a trade, but I guess I would be personally a bit surprised if either were included in a trade. Cedric, probably for the obvious reason that I've talked about, it's the contract. You'd have to find a team that's fairly desperate at wide receiver to take on him and to take on his contract. And then Jeff Wilson, it's not necessarily the contract, but it's the insurance that he provides to the Dolphins at the position. Because if you look at our injuries so far, Mostert has been a little bit banged up. He's been relatively healthy, but Achane missed time right away. Obviously, Jeff Wilson has been hurt up until this point and still has continued to be out. So our running backs have a little bit of that injury history. So we're going to need some bodies. And I know Chris Brooks has been good in his limited action as well, but we need the bodies. So more so just for insurance, the contract that we have him on, I think that he would probably be pretty safe. This one I sort of summarized a little bit, but it talks about the Miami Dolphins defense and our lack of changing it up last week and Vic Fangio maybe being a little bit too stubborn. So I summarized it from Dan here. Thoughts on a Vic Fangio, kind of Josh Boyer from last year, hybrid defensive attack. To that, I would say I think it's going to be a little bit hard to mix in more blitzing because of the coverage and the schemes that Vic Fangio wants to run. Fangio wants to get to the quarterback with 4 or 5 guys. He wants to keep all those guys back. He wants to bend but not break. He wants to be able to beat you up front and then force you throwing into coverage when there's more guys out there to passes away, to create turnovers. He also wants to use his blitzes more strategically. You remember the Chargers game? Didn't blitz much of all that game. The last possession comes down. It's only a 2-point game. We're all worried as hell. Man, he unloaded some blitzes. Herbert wasn't ready. The offensive line wasn't ready. We sealed that game. No issues whatsoever. So adding more blitzes throughout the game and not being able to use them strategically sort of takes away that element of surprise. So I think it's a little bit tough to actually make these kind of wide sweeping changes to your defense. So my opinion would be ride it out. We're playing against a team that just gave up 11 sacks. And then we've got the Panthers next week as well, playing with a rookie quarterback. You got to try to just maintain with what you've been doing, get some momentum, learn some things over these next 2 weeks, and just kind of ride it out from there. Went a little bit longer on that one. But at the end of the day, like I said, I'm trying to cram 2 videos into one. Let's talk about Claypool real quick as well. Saw that on Friday. Personally, going into the season, especially seeing after a video, someone cut up Chase Claypool's basically effort in his routes and his blocking in the run game, and he just looked lazy. He looked like he didn't want to be there, and we've basically seen the Bears keep him inactive now. So I'm like, you know what? Don't really have time for a guy like that. But then when you see the compensation, you're like, it's pretty low risk for a guy with some fairly high reward. Big if it pans out. It's a 2025 6th rounder for Claypool and the Bears 2025 7th rounder. So you're not really necessarily giving away much of anything in here. And quite honestly, I don't know if I see that the attitude, the lack of effort being a huge detriment when he's in Miami, because look at when he was with the Steelers and when he was with the Bears. He was sort of relied upon, counted on as one of the team's top wide receivers. In Miami, he's not that. He's obviously behind Hill and Waddle, and there's probably already a sizable gap between him and Berrios. So at this point, he's kind of seeing this as like, this is my last chance. This is my last chance for someone to take to re-sign me next year. I believe he only has the 1 year left on his contract. And there's so many damn good quality wide receivers in the league that this is his chance to really prove himself. So I don't necessarily think there's going to be a lack of effort when he gets out there, or there's going to be attitude issues. If there are, cut your losses. But at the end of the day, it's such a low risk, high reward move that I'm not even mad about it at this point in time. I see it almost more so as a contingency plan because of Craycraft and Ezukama basically being on those IR positions and them guys being out maybe a little bit longer than we originally counted on. So like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the player in general, but at the end of the day, you're going to get Chase Claypool, who has had some success in this league, especially early in his career. You can hardly even be mad at the situation. Let's go into the prediction. We'll wrap it up here quick. Dolphins 31, Giants 17. We get back in the win column. And it kind of boils back down to my key matchups, my players to watch and everything. You can contain Dexter Lawrence. Don't let him disrupt things. Don't let him disrupt things in the middle. You keep Tua upright. 1 sack the first 3 weeks. Then what did we give up last week? 4. And we saw how less efficient the offense was. Keep him upright, get the ground game going, rely on that. Have something that you can always fall back on. And if having the run game being the thing that you can always fall back on, that is a huge plus in the NFL, especially when you have an offense that's as dynamic as the one that we have with Tua, with Waddle, with Hill, with all the yards we have, with all the points we have, and everything that we've been doing so far this season. And then defensively, you got to ride the wave. You got to hope that you can continue to just get those sacks coming. We're not going to get 11 sacks. I mean, if we do, great, I'll do a cartwheel. But you still got to get pressure all the time. The 49ers only got 2 sacks against them. But you got to continue to get pressure. You got to get the sacks when you can get it. We got to get a little bit of momentum coming from just rushing with those 4 or 5 guys. But at the end of the day, I think we've got too much firepower. The Giants, if you look at their statistics offensively, Daniel Jones has like 2 touchdowns. Saquon's been hurt. He's likely not going to play. There's not a pass catcher out there outside of Darren Waller that really even scares you. We have no excuse but to win this game, and hopefully we can do it in convincing fashion. But that is what I've got. Like I said, my apologies for only the one preview video this week. Hotel internet indeed does suck. But that is what I've got. Go ahead, drop your thoughts, drop your predictions in the comments. Let's carry on the conversation leading up to game time. And until following the game with the recap show, Dolphins fans, Fins